Today I would like to make a live demonstration of how you can use large language models to help you with analyzing data. And here we will assume that you want to kind of use some programming. You understand that you would require some programming to implement your analysis, but let's assume that you don't know any programming. It will just ask LLM, in this case Claude, just to help us with programming. So this will be kind of live video, so I'm not sure what will be the result, but I think it also makes it more interesting because, the only preparations that I've made is that I opened a new Claude chat. I also prepared Jupyter Notebook. This is, if you don't know, an environment where you can write Python programs. And I also have a data file. A data file contains questions that were asked on two subreddits, Ask Men and Ask Women, and I want to somehow to visualize, analyze them. So I will start with maybe very general. I also will start a timer because maybe I will speed up some parts of this video. So I want to start a timer just to see how much time it would require. Okay, let's start. So I will just explain Claude what data I have. So I have data, which is short texts and binary attribute. I want to somehow cluster and visualize it. Okay, that's my request. Let's see what Claude will suggest us. So it's asking me about examples of this data. She just wants to understand some details about the data. And he already has some suggestions. I will just now describe what my data is. So my data is questions asked on Ask Men and Ask Women subreddits, and attribute correspond to gender. Okay, so it's kind of flattering me, saying that's really interesting data set for text analysis. I think it's a bit of ridiculous because you know that it's just, artificial intelligence, but I think it keeps these conversations kind of nice when they say, it's really interesting data set for text analysis. And you think, oh yes, thank you for appreciating my choice. It suggests just to each data represent a question, each data point. So it basically suggests me some approach. So now I want to do it kind of in React and create a visual component. So I think I want to keep it simpler. So I would probably tell him, I think I don't need any interactivity at this point. Let's just analyze using Python. It's immediately create me Python code. Let's just copy it. Let's assume I don't understand what's happening. I'll copy it and try to run, and I will see. I never mentioned what's the name of my data file. It just created me. So you kind of assume that my data is called like this, and then there's a question subreddit colon. I should probably just inform it. My data file is called data.csv and columns are titles and gender. So I'm doing this not because I cannot easily fix it on my own, but because I want it in future refer it properly, because I don't want to rename it after each iteration, and usually I suspect that usually nothing works from the very first iteration. So I rename it on my own, data. So question subreddit. So subreddit should be gender, and question should be, I think I called it titles in my data, titles. So now let me try to run this. So this code is just defining some function. I just run it, and now I will run this code. Okay, it's saying me key arrow titles. It seems that I probably forget myself what the name of this was. Maybe it was just title. Okay, now I think it's okay. So it's created me something. So okay, there is like a nice plot, but there is nothing happening on this plot. So I will just report it back to Claude. I see plot canvas, but there are no dots. So the problem is it just provided me a complete plot, and I never like it, like to have a complete code, to have it in one go. It makes much more sense to do it step by step. So I actually would ask it to do it step by step. Also, it never explained me, I think, properly what steps it is doing. So I kind of understand it, that it's using converting it to vectors, using TF-EDF, and then using PCA to extract components. So I kind of understand it, but it never explained it. And if you are doing it like for the first time, you definitely want to understand what's going on. So also please describe all steps to me. Yeah, maybe even it's better to ask it to describe me the steps before we're implementing, so we can kind of discuss this approach and then move to implementation. So I would add, actually, please discuss the approach with me first, and then let's move to implementation. So let's see what's happening. So as you can see, it's again kind of flattering me. You're absolutely right. Yeah, so the general approach that it uses, and that I would also think is reasonable, is that first you have a text. So if you want to work with text, you need to represent it as numbers. And there are different ways to represent as numbers. So it's recommended me to use TF-IDF. It also mentioned word embeddings and simple back of words. Then usually what these approaches do, they represent text as a lot of numbers, but if you want to visualize it or to use some other methods, it's usually kind of useful to reduce the dimensionality. So you reduce it usually to 2, because then you can plot it into D. And then it's actually used PCA as a result, and then it's plotting scatter plot. So now this is also an example of why you kind of can start doing immediately some things with large language models, but it's much better to have some understanding what's going on, because I think that's TF-IDF is not the best approach in this step, and PCA is also not the best approach. So now I'm kind of wondering if I should directly ask it to implement what I want to implement, or to see what will happen with the approach that Claude suggested me. I think, yeah, because now I'm trying to pretend that I don't understand much what's happening. I will just try to follow its advice. I will just ask it to do it step by step. So say, okay, let's start with point 1, provide a code for Z. Okay, I just copy this. So the advantage of environment like Jupyter Notebook is that you can kind of run these snippets of codes more or less independently. That's, I think, useful for this sort of prototyping that we are now doing. So I still need to fix these titles. Hop. Okay, so it's returned me something. It seems to work. I mean, I don't know. Let's imagine that I don't know what's going on, and I'm actually not know what's going on. But there's kind of no like zeros, no like strange results. Seems like some numbers is working. I probably will report what is the TDF matrix. Maybe it's important because I think at one point it was asking me what is my data size, and I never answered. It seems that this step works. I've got okay. So now it's moving to step 2. By the way, we spent around 10 minutes at this point of time. Yeah, okay, I will just again blindly copy what is there. Hop, hop. Let's wait. I can drink some coffee. Okay, so now it converted things to 2 dimensions. Yeah, and I think it's actually also applied dimensionality reduction. Wait. So it applied 2-dimensionality reduction. Okay, interesting. So it's applied simultaneously 2-dimensionality reduction techniques. I'm not sure why. Was it applying? Okay, it's applied 2 of them, which is a bit unexplainable to me. Okay, it seems that I have got some 2D representations. What is the next step? Okay, so now I'm kind of more convinced that the problem was with plotting, because this seems like to be some random numbers, which nothing suspicious about them. Let's now run. Maybe it will even work with this. So sometimes you just ask it to do step by step and it works. Okay, try to do step 2 projections, and we see nothing. I'm kind of curious why we see nothing. Okay, I will just report it. I see nothing on both plots. What might be happening? Well, also, if you know programming, if you know Python, it might be much easier for you to just to detect the problem on your own. But here we're assuming that we always just rely on Claude, and we'll see if it would help us. Okay, suggest me some things to try to see if something is happening. Okay, let's try to do. So we just ask it, and I will just now report the results back. It's asked me to do, wait. So it asked me to do first, second, third, and I think, well, it never answered me if it's okay or not. It just said me that I should. Oh, sorry, I reported. Yeah, sorry, I just. So I was confused and I pasted something else, not the output. Sorry. The output for 1 is. That's the output for 1. The second, it asked me to do this. So So yeah, I think we already kind of see what the error is. For 2 is okay. Okay, so now to realize that it's kind of assumes that my gender is encoded as men and women, but the real codes was 0 and 1. So it suggests me an improvement. Now let's try again. So I will remove this code that wasn't working. I will do this and I will check. Oh, and I have very beautiful images. Yeah, it's really interesting what's happening. Yeah, so we have kind of strange representations. So it kind of worked. So what we achieved is that we get some like representation of posts, but you can see this is not useful at all. And this is also not useful. And this is probably expected because the approach that it suggested was not optimal. So I would now ask it to do something different. Yeah, again, it's like if you don't know what you want to see at this stage, you can realize that this is not a good picture, because what you want to see is kind of different clusters that would probably represent different topics in this Reddit posts, and this is just 2 blobs, and this is not connected to anything. And PCA is also not a good method for dimensionality reduction, because it's kind of just linear transformation, might not work so well. So now I will suggest another approach. So we spent on this first plot already 16 minutes. So I wouldn't try to advertise this video as, you can do any analysis in 10 minutes, because that's already not the case. But let's see how much time we will need for this. So now we'll ask it, I want to modify approach. Particular, I want to use text embeddings and UMap rather than what it was using. It was using TF-IDF rather than TF-IDF, and so you might say that here I'm employing my expert knowledge. So it suggests me to do something. Yeah, now let's try this new approach. I think, do I need just to copy paste, or do I need to assume? Okay, this is like first step for embeddings. Let's see if it works. It gives me warning, but warning is not an arrow. So it has to install something to download a model, and now I never informed it that the right. Hey, it did something with my data. Hop, hop. Okay, now I will tell it it worked. It worked. It worked. So you might have noticed that I used some of my knowledge, but I was never writing like code on my own, except for fixing this title thing. Hop. Okay, this is a bit better. I still don't kind of a big fan of this map, but at least we have, like, you see, you have a clear isolated cluster here. It's another cluster. So there seem to be like a clusters, and which probably correspond to a similar topic. You can play with parameters of this algorithm. You might have a better picture, but I think what's important is that there is already some clusters. So Now let's say I want to continue my analysis and I want to kind of identify some of these clusters and to see what's going on there. So I will ask Claude to help me with this analysis. We are now on 20 minutes mark. I think the results are nice. Since the results are nice, now I want to automatically identify some clusters. Again, it suggests me k-means method, which is just a bad idea to use on this data. Even if it's like one of the most common algorithms, it just doesn't work for this type of data. Yeah, I guess I will directly just ask it again to do something different. I'm thinking more about HDB scan. Again, it's kind of telling me that it's a great choice. You can also see that it was before also telling me that UMAP is great. To say that it's better than PCA. So you might wonder why it suggested me a PCA if it knows that UMAP is better, but it could be also just flattering me. But also the statement is true. So I think UMAP is just preferred to PCA and TSNA. Like it is in practice, UMAP always worked better for me. Yeah, so it returned me a code. I also want to understand. Yeah, we'll just copy this. Okay, just copy this. Just add a bit more empty lines. Okay, so it ran this algorithm and it's identified some clusters. So this is kind of pretty cool, right? So remember that we didn't know much. So like there's a lot of code, right? And I didn't need to type any of it, right? I still need to use my knowledge. And now I have this thing that, it's not ideal. We have to probably play a bit with parameters of this data to identify more clusters. But it's already identified clearly these two clusters, which I think is cool. I will also let's say, I will just tell it what I see. So I see two clear clusters, but everything else is just one cluster. What would be your advice regarding parameters of this? Okay, so it's explaining me things. Okay, it's suggesting that I will again, I will try to not to think too much. It just suggests me run this code. I run this code and it's telling me that with these parameters I get 2 clusters, with this I get 3 clusters, with this I get 80 clusters. So 80 clusters seems to be good. So I probably should use min cluster 15 and min sample 3. Let's try this. Min cluster, I will just try to find where these parameters are sent. So I think it's asked me to use 15 and 3. Let me double check. Min cluster size, min samples, yes. Now let's rerun this code. Okay, now I see, so I see the same 2 clusters, but also many more clusters. Yeah, I think it's probably, there's also noise, it's just gray. I think I'm more or less satisfied with this. So what I now want to do maybe is to see yeah, maybe I'll just ask it to kind of output 10 titles per cluster, so I can see what's going on. Yeah, we'll just ask it. So what if I now want to print all clusters with sample of maximum 10 titles per cluster. Let's see what I got here. Okay, just created me code. We'll continue our routine. I'll just paste in it. Hop. Again, it has the same problem. That's also like a good example. So sometimes you're just lazy to fix something. I like never tell it that it's called titles because I think it would be easy to fix. And then it's so now we have this. So this algorithm is just not split all data in clusters. It's also allow for noise. That's make, I think it's kind of a better approach because in some case you just have like random points and it's better not to force it to be in a certain cluster. So there's like this noise cluster, not interesting for us. Let's see of cluster 0. And let's see if we can see any pattern here. Okay, so it's obviously about music, right? It's like rapper, listening, terrible music taste, should I listen to? So this cluster is about listening music, right? Let's look at the next cluster. It's like food combination, favorite beer. This cluster about food. So it's kind of worked. So what we now created, so we have this huge data set of 400 different topics. And now we were able to make kind of sense of it. We were able to identify a common topics. You can try, I mean, there would be not much alternatives for you if you don't know programming, because yeah, you can try to code these topics by hand, but that would be a very long, you would need to spend a lot of time. So now just to make it a bit more interesting, let's try to ask it to cluster, to sort clusters by kind of gender proportion. So we would like to see some like the most men clusters and women clusters. More precisely, the questions that we ask on Ask Women and Ask Men Reddit. So I will ask it to do this. So finally, please help me to see 5 clusters with the maybe 10 clusters. 10 clusters with the highest proportion of Ask Men and Ask Women, respectively. 5 for each. So it's doing something. Copy. Okay, I have an error. Oh, that's again this title error. I mean, that's really funny. Hop, hop. Okay, so man-dominated cluster. So it says it's also kind of assumed. It's kind of assumed what label corresponds to man, and it's actually, I think, was wrong. So this was questions probably from Ask Women. So because it's about periods. Yeah, so this is the questions that was asked on Ask Women, not Ask Men forum, which is kind of explainable. Let's see what's the next one. So it's about selfies. So yeah, selfies, but also about tattoos. Yeah, it's kind of mixed tattoos and selfies. So it's probably about, yeah, it's mostly about tattoos actually. And some it's just about appearances. So you can see that it's about appearances, which can be tattoos, selfies, and also like lipsticks, etc. And yeah, let's now maybe move to opposite side, and let's look at what's asked. So this is women-dominated clusters, but because it's incorrectly assumed what label is for what, this is actually not women-dominated clusters, but most commonly asked questions on Ask Men subreddit. So it's obviously about, okay, something about like dating, balance school and dating. Yeah, so yes, he kind of lost a woman, rejected from a date, dating someone from work. So it's kind of about dating questions. The next is about movies, probably. Yes, it's about movies, etc., etc. So what movie? Like, so you can see that these topics, because topics on these subreddits are really diverse. It can be like ranging from anything to anything. And you can see that our algorithm actually worked pretty well. And we also can get answer this research question. You might argue that it's not very interesting research question, but we were able actually to ask questions. What are the topics that are mostly kind of asked, which are women are asked more often than men, much more often, and vice versa. So we were able to do this analysis without like writing a single line of code on our own. And it took me, half an hour. It took me half an hour, and that's of course, a bit unfair time, because I was quite quick with it because I knew what's going on, and like some errors like that I'm missing attribute, I was kind of it was providing me code with titles, but the right attribute was title. I was able to solve it immediately. So your real workflow, especially if you are a beginner, would be, I think, much longer. You will need to spend much more time to understand what's going on. And also, as we've seen, that the approach that it recommends by default were not optimal. But it actually kind of knows that UMAP, for example, is better than PCA. It just didn't suggest it for some reason. So I guess I would encourage you first to start with a plan. Like I asked him at one point, not him, but it, at one point, what would be the plan? And then you can ask, is this the best approach to use PCA at this stage? What alternatives? What would be the best? And it could help you to create like a good plan, and then it will implement it almost perfectly. There was not much bugs that we need to debug. I think there was almost nothing, right? Maybe nothing at all, except for my own bugs that I introduced on my own. No, there was this bug when it's assumed that labels are men and women, not 0 and 1, but we were able to quickly fix it. Yeah, so I hope this was experimental video for me. I hope it was instructive or interesting to you. See you in other videos. Bye.